Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So this week, we are heading back to Eldritch Moon Standard for a deck I'm super excited about. This is a Eldritch Evolution combo deck that contains not one, but two really sweet combos. I'm calling this one Naya Evolution. As you can see, 91 bucks in the paper world, only 29 ticks on Magic Online. A quick reminder before we break it all down. If you enjoy this deck and want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So Naya Evolution is built around Eldritch Evolution. So 3 mana, you gotta sack a creature, and you get to search for a creature with the converted mana cost of the sacrifice creature plus 2 or less. So if you sack a 3-drop, you can get a 5-drop or anything that costs less than 5, for example, and put it directly onto the battlefield. So this card kind of makes the entire deck run, because we play a bunch of creatures, and we also play a bunch of one-ofs that are not very good in a lot of situations, but are extremely good in the right situation when we're going through one combo or another. So Eldritch Evolution allows us to play a whole bunch of one-ofs, almost like Birthing Pod, for example, a one-shot Birthing Pod, and we can search up whatever combo piece we need at any given time thanks to Eldritch Evolution, and we don't have to overload our deck with subpar cards just so we make sure we draw all our combo pieces. So, combo number 1 is Eerie Interlude and Green Warden of Murasa. So Eerie Interlude blinks any number of creatures you control, and then you get them back at the end of your turn. Well, if you have a Green Warden of Murasa as one of those creatures, when you blink the Green Warden and it comes back in, you can immediately get the Eerie Interlude back from the graveyard so you can blink everything again. So this is kind of a standard version of a fringe modern combo deck, Ghostway combo, which uses Ghostway, which is very similar to Eerie Interlude, and Eternal Witness, which is a cheaper Green Warden of Murasa, to go through this loop. So what this combo wants to do is we get a bunch of creatures that have enter the battlefield triggers on the battlefield, and then we take advantage of those enter the battlefield triggers again and again and again by looping Green Warden and Eerie Interlude. So we can actually do it twice each turn cycle. We do it once on our turn, everything blinks, comes back. Do it again on our opponent's turn, everything blinks, comes back. So we're just stacking up tons and tons of enter the battlefield triggers, generating a ton of value and advantage from this loop, and eventually it's going to win us the game. So as far as generating advantage, the main thing we do is draw cards. We have a bunch of creatures that one way or another allow us to draw a card when they enter the battlefield. Thraben Inspector is decent because it's a 1-drop, gives us something to do on the first turn of the game. The downside is it doesn't just straight up draw us a card, like Elvish Visionary, for example. Instead, it gives us a clue, and we got to sack the clue. And we got a sweet workaround for this that we'll talk about in a minute, but basically we blink it, sooner or later it will draw us a card. Elvish Visionary lets us draw a card right away. Really great in this deck, so we can cast it on turn 2, it cycles, and then once we start looping our Eerie Interludes, basically we turn our Eerie Interlude into not only blink all our creatures, but draw multiple cards every time we go through the loop. Sage of Ancient Lore probably looks weird. It's essentially a 5-mana Elvish Visionary. Probably wondering why we'd play a 5-mana Elvish Visionary. Well, we wanted another creature that drew a card when it entered the battlefield, and Sage of Ancient Lore does that. Plus, it's actually pretty sweet with Eldritch Evolution, because we can sack Sage of Ancient Lore to Eldritch Evolution and get our 6-drops, and 6-drops are actually pretty important to our combo. For one thing, it's Green Warden, but also Soul of the Harvest, which is the ultimate card draw spell for this loop. So when we have a Soul of the Harvest on the battlefield, and we loop everything with the Eerie Interlude, blink it, it comes back, we draw cards equal to the number of creatures we control, -1, because Soul of the Harvest doesn't trigger itself. So if we have Soul of the Harvest and 5 other creatures, we loop with your Interlude, we draw 5, and that's not even counting Elvish Visionaries and Thraben Inspectors and Sage of Ancient Lore, the other draws. So once we get a Soul on the battlefield, it usually puts the game out of reach pretty quickly thanks to the card advantage. And then We gain a ton of life with Pious Evangel, so we're going to talk about Pious Evangel more in a minute. Pious Evangel is a key piece to our second combo, but it also has value here, so kind of like how Soul of the Harvest draws us a card for each creature, -1, the Soul of the Harvest, Pious Evangel gains us a life for each creature we control when we go through the loop with Naya Evolution, so eventually we're gaining tons of life each time we go through this loop, drawing a ton of cards as we go through this loop, and to make matters even better, we can activate all of our stuff at instant speed. Chasm Guide and Cryptolithrites are really sweet in this deck. So Cryptolithrites, on one hand, just lets us ramp into our expensive stuff, our 6-drops, using our Thraben Inspectors, our Elvish Visionaries, as Birds of Paradise. One of the problems with our loop is, for example, Thraben Inspector enters the battlefield, gives us a clue. We want to be able to draw that card, but we can't really draw that card because we probably don't have the mana. Well, if we have a Cryptolithrites on the battlefield and a Chasm Guide, when all of our creatures enter the battlefield from Eerie Interlude, they also have haste. So we have a whole bunch of Birds of Paradise with haste, which means we can just immediately start tapping creatures to sack our clues, to draw cards. We can use that mana to cast another Eerie Interlude to keep the loop going. So there's a ton of value in Chasm Guide just because it gives everything haste. And then, to actually close out the game with this loop, one way we win is just building up our board and attacking. We draw a ton of extra cards, eventually we just have way more creatures than our opponent, swing with everything and win. We can also just put the game out of reach by gaining a ton of life with Pious Evangel. We get to 100, 200 life, and even though we haven't actually won, it's going to be hard for us to actually lose. But the way we kill our opponent with the loop is Impact Tremors, so now this turns Eerie Interlude into, we draw a ton of cards based on Souls of the Harvest, our Thraben Inspectors, our Elvish Visionaries. We gain a ton of life thanks to Pious Evangel, plus we deal damage equal to the number of creatures we control. When they enter the battlefield, each creature is dealing a damage to our opponent. It usually only takes 1 or 2 loops to actually close out the game once we find our Impact Tremors. Yes, it's only a one of, but as I've been talking about, we draw so many cards, it's not that hard to find. And now we have a second combo, and this one might look a little bit familiar because we played a version of this combo way back when Oath of the Gatewatch first released. So the main thing of this combo is Eldrazi Displacer and Brood Monitor. With Eldrazi Displacer, we can generate infinite enters the battlefield and dies triggers with Brood Monitor. We sack the Scion tokens from Brood Monitor to activate Eldrazi Displacer, which gives us enough mana to activate the Blink ability, targeting Brood Monitor, which gives us more Scion tokens. So essentially we can just do this any number of times. Pious Evangel gains us an infinite amount of life with this combo, which is sweet. It also works with our Impact Tremors, deals damage, but we can flip Pious Evangel around, and it turns into a Blood Artist type effect, a Zulaport Cutthroat, where whenever a creature dies, we gain a life and our opponent loses a life, so that gives us infinite damage with the Brood Monitor combo, because we're sacking those Scions, so each time we go through the loop, we're draining our opponent for 3, gaining 3 life, and that closes out the game pretty quickly. The last card is Eyeless Watcher, the one card in our deck that isn't really a combo piece, but it's in the deck because we needed 4-drops for Eldritch Evolution, and it's a good 4-drop to sack, because if we sack a 4-drop, we get to get our 6-drops, which means we can get Brood Monitor for the infinite combo with Eldrazi Displacer, we can get Green Warden to go through the loop with Eerie Interlude, or if we already have the loop set up, we can get the Souls of the Harvest to draw a bunch of cards, and drawing all those cards will likely draw us into our infinite combos to win the game. Mana base wise, a bunch of colorless lands, Battlefield Forge, Caves of Koilos, Yavimaya Coast. Caves and Yavimaya Coast are just white and green lands that also happen to tap for colorless for activating our Displacer. We also have a single waste, so we can search it up with Evolving Wilds, along with the rest of our basic lands. And then a few dual lands. In the sideboard, we get some removal, Fiery Impulse and Planar Outburst. Then we have some specific hate cards for decks that have recently been popular. Stasis Snare, one of the ways we can hit at Emrakul. Orbs of Warding stops an Emrakul steal your turn trigger, but most importantly, it's so good against a blue-red Thermo Alchemist thing in the ice deck. Shuts down Thermo Alchemist, shuts down burn spells, and a Light and Ascetic actually kills a Fevered Visions. Howled Moonlight fights against Collected Company, and then El Linvala is good against aggro. We blink it, we're going to gain a bunch of life. And that is Naya Evolution for Standard. So I think this deck is really sweet. A little worried about the Bat and Company matchup. The one reason I think the Eldritch Evolution hasn't exploded into being a standard staple is because it kind of gets wrecked by Spell Queller. If your opponent Spell Quellers in Eldritch Evolution, you lose your creature, you don't get another creature, and even if you kill a Spell Queller, you don't really get much value out of your Eldritch Evolution. So that's the risky part. On the other hand, I think this deck can do a lot of cool things. It can gain a ton of life. The combos are both pretty sweet. And when it's not getting Spell Quellered, Eldritch Evolution is awesome. So there's just a lot of cool lines and cool stuff going on with this deck. We can blink all of our creatures after blocking all of our opponent's stuff. So it's really hard for our opponent to get through combat damage on the ground to kill us. So I think it's pretty sweet. I'm pretty excited about it. Anyway, that's been our Naya Evolution deck tech. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.